All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jenna Schwannard, Head of Marketing at PCA Technology Group, and I'll be your host for this webinar. Before I hand it over to your expert, Brian Powell, who is our CTO and Certified Ethical Hacker at PCA, I just want to remind you that this is our brand new CyberSmart series, which is a quick 30-minute dive into important cybersecurity topics. We understand there are so many evolving parts to cybersecurity, and we're here to help educate and really just highlight what you need to know, which takes us to today's topic, What the DR, deep dive into cybersecurity acronyms. So this webinar will be recorded, and you can keep a lookout for a follow-up email with the recording and some additional resources for your reference. And as we go through the presentation, if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to drop them in the chat, and we'll make sure to get those answered for you before we conclude today. But with all that being said, I'd now like to hand it over to Brian Powell from PCA.
Thank you, Jenna. Appreciate it. Thanks for everyone for joining us here for about a half hour, roughly. We're just going to be going over a lot of what these acronyms mean. There's a lot of DRs out there, and everyone's kind of like, okay, I don't know what any of this stuff means, but we're hopefully at least answer that for you pretty quickly here. As mentioned, my name's Brian. I'm the CTO here, and I'll be just going through this slide presentation for you. So kick things right off, agenda-wise, security frameworks. So I'm not going to get real deep into the security frameworks, but I need to cover this just to at least show you some foundational aspects of what all these DR solutions are building off of, and then also some of the common types of those frameworks. We're going to focus at least on the NIST side of things today. I'll show you what those are, and anyone that's been in that realm will see that that number has gone from 5 elements to 6 elements now. So we'll be covering the 2.0 version of NIST. And detection and response, well, that's what DR actually stands for, and then all the other acronyms for the letters in front will explain what that is, why it's important, and then what are the different types of DRs that are out there. So foundationally, what is a security framework? Well, it defines policies, procedures for establishing and maintaining basically your controls for security. They clarify what you're doing, how to protect things from the organizational standpoint. The big thing is keeping your organizations from cybersecurity risks is what it comes down to. They also assist IT security professionals and security teams to make sure that their organizations are compliant too. So you notice that compliance comes after, your security policies. So what you don't want to do is actually flip that around and make your compliance more important than security, because you're really not covering the security aspect of it. You're more focused on checking the boxes sometimes when it comes to just that compliance thing. If you do the security stuff, you're more likely you will be compliant as a result of just following the best practices from the security side. So with that, here are some common security frameworks. Like I said, I'm not going to go too deep into this. If you are interested in more of the security frameworks, we'll cover those in more depth in our next series coming up, and we'll talk about that later. But these are just some. You got SOC 2, you got ISO 27001, you got NIST CSF, HIPAA, PCI DSS, GPDR is the European one. You got High Trust, you got COBIT. You got NERC CIP, you got FISMA, NIST, a bunch of versions of NIST there, obviously. So the one that we're going to focus on really is the CSF one, but we also have CIS controls down there, and most of our managed service clients actually, so CIS controls is kind of a subset of the NIST CSF framework. This is pretty intensive if you try to follow this to its T. So the CIS controls basically is kind of a subset of that framework. So all of our managed services clients are following and fall under CIS controls, but they do directly map back up to that NIST. So if you were to be, an organization that needs some type of compliance that follows the NIST framework, it's very easy to map your existing controls up to the NIST because they're just subsets of it. So foundationally, that's kind of how that all works. And, you may fall under a bunch of these depending on the business you're in, or you may only fall under some of these. So again, we're not going to get real deep into the framework side of things. So there are 6 elements in the NIST CSF now, and basically the one that was added, you can see here you got identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Those are the 5 original elements, and now they've added an internal one, which is governance, which is basically making sure that the the oversight is being done at the leadership type of organization. When it comes to cybersecurity, obviously, it starts at the top down. It doesn't mean that you're whoever's at the top of your org chart, whether it's a CEO or whether it's a board, doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be cybersecurity experts, but ultimately they are the ones that are responsible for the organization's cybersecurity policies and making sure that they're being followed. So that's where that governance piece comes into play in the newness framework, that it adds that oversight ability and gives guidance on how those C levels could potentially do that without having that expertise. So with that foundation, it kind of leads us into what is DR. So DR basically stands for detection and response, and what it basically does is it allows you to be able to detect cybersecurity events in very short spans of time, and then react to those, or either take action or mitigate what it's detecting. So let's say someone emails you a malicious file in your email. The idea behind DR is that it's going to either on the way through your mail server or once it hits your mailbox. So it could be either something running on your server or it could be something running on your endpoint, your laptop or your desktop, that detection piece would pick up that malicious file. And then, depending on what mitigation steps that piece of software has, it could either quarantine it, it could delete it, it could keep it from even coming through. It might pull it out completely, or something like that. So that's kind of the detection and response piece of this. In the old methods, it was kind of, really it was called antivirus, and antivirus is kind of gone with the wind at this point. It's really called endpoint detection and response, and we'll get into that here in the next slide. But most of the AVs were based on signature detection. So what that means is that for every virus that was out there, if it was a brand new virus and wasn't detected, those signatures didn't exist. So we kind of called that the moat and castle approach, that basically, if someone could swim across the moat undetected, they were in the castle. Whereas, with the signatures and known antiviruses, the programs and software, the AV software back in the day, would have those signatures and look for the specific pieces of the viruses that were being sent through, and that's how it would detect that. So now it's more of a reactive versus a proactive approach. So obviously the modern approach also involves machine learning. So sometimes it also picks up how you're using your data, the human behavior piece of it too. So it goes a lot deeper than just oh well, here's the virus, here's its signature or fingerprint, and that's how we detect it. So much more advanced detection and response versus AV. That's the biggest thing. So with that, we'll start with the first one. So initially, this was called EDR, or endpoint detection and response, and now it has morphed into endpoint prevention detection and response. So it's really deployed. This is something that is deployed at laptops, desktops, servers, could be on mobile as well. It is a true prevention, not just a protection. So basically, it does give you the capability that if it detects something and you have it in your rule set, you can either automatically isolate the machine if it feels it's necessary, or you can manually do that upon detection too. So it might send you a ticket or an alert or an email or something saying, hey, we picked up a malicious piece of software. You can go into that management console for the EPDR and actually isolate that machine. And what that'll do is it will only communicate back to the management portal, but it'll keep it isolated from the rest of your network so it can't propagate that malicious file or whatever it picked up, whether it's ransomware or anything like that. It does detect malware. It uses indicators of compromise, and it also can pick up fileless attacks. So what happens now is the bad guys, as I mentioned, with the old AV tactics, the antivirus software would pick up those signatures, and it was usually an actual file. Now what they do, instead of sending actual physical files, they're sending pieces of code that are actually stored in memory. So there is no file that's being stored on the disk at all. It's all memory based. So, traditional antiviruses, since there was no file there to scan, the scans would never pick it up because it wasn't looking at the memory. So, with the EPDR, it does actually analyze the memory allocations and stuff, and looks for these fileless attacks in there. So it could very well pick those up as well too. And then EPDR, and this is where the foundational piece comes back, it does fulfill all of the NIST standards in one solution. So this basically covers all aspects of the NIST framework for endpoints. So EPDR would be one that would check all the boxes on that NIST framework. So with that brings us to the next one. The next one is called NDR. So network detection and response. So this is a little different, obviously. So this has capabilities. This is mainly looking at your network traffic and network logistics and things like that. So it's looking at the flow of things through the organization. This usually involves some type of an appliance that sits in your network somewhere. Ideally, we usually like to set this on the inside, right on the inside of your firewall. So anything coming in or going out, this box would be right there at that doorway, watching everything inbound and outbound. And we tend to do it. It's basically inline. So basically, every piece of traffic is going through that device. So it's actually looking at every single piece of information going in and out of your network. It does also prevent data exfiltration, odd timing or transfer sizes, unauthorized protocols and port usage. So it'll pick up all that stuff and alert you to it. So, if after, this device is in there and it kind of learns your behaviors, let's say, it's been in there for 2 or 3 months, and then all of a sudden it sees this huge amount of traffic and data being pushed from inside your network out. If that wasn't something that was happening in previous months, it would definitely either block it or raise an alarm saying, hey, we're noticing a large increase in traffic here. Could be somebody, maliciously trying to pull data off your network or send it somewhere. So that's definitely that you normally wouldn't have in unless you had something like an NDR appliance in your network. The other thing that mentioned too is that there are a lot of remote workers nowadays, and unfortunately, with NDR, you have limited value when most of your workforce is remote workers, because again, this kind of sits inside your network, inside your firewall. If all of your users are outside of your firewall, you're not going to get quite the capabilities of what you normally would if they were sitting in an office. So just keep that in mind, that some of the capabilities of this won't you'll have limited value in it from remote workers. So that's NDA. And then we have TDR. So TDR is threat detection and response. And this one's a little interesting because this kind of came out of, whether it's marketing hype or whether it's basically multiple vendors have multiple meanings for this, so there's no clear-cut way of saying what this is. But in the simplest forms, it's a broader set of tools that relies on technologies and processes designed to protect against cyber attacks utilizing the organization's real-time security data. So what this does is it kind of looks at things like your vulnerability scans. It could look at your behavioral analysis. It will look at real-time threat intelligence from external sources. It could look at threat hunting things. It could look at penetration. Basically, it kind of uses all that information and kind of feeds it into a central location for processing. So if anyone's familiar with a SIEM, it's basically it's a logging server that basically takes all your logs from all kinds of different sources and puts them into a single place for categorizing and looking for for potentially malicious things, and then alerting out to that. That's kind of what threat detection is sort of. It's not exactly a SIEM, but it does definitely give the impression of something like that, where it will take a bunch of different source data and combine it in to try to make an analysis out of it. So you can see there's a whole bunch of utilities there. It could leverage your EPDR potentially too as part of that feed, determine, is there something really going on, or is there not something really going on? But that's kind of the idea behind TDR. And again, multiple vendors have multiple different meanings for this. So it's kind of hard to explain it in simplistic form, because there's so many different definitions out there of how certain vendors are kind of putting this in place and not in place. But that's the simplest form. That it's kind of like a log aggregator that kind of decides whether it's going to pick up the threat and respond to that according to the pieces of information that are being fed into it. So then we have MDR. So MDR is managed detection and response. So this is kind of like having your, it's basically someone watching your network. So it could have, much like the TDR, this one here is having someone physically watch all that stuff and react for you. So there's live bodies that are watching this. It's 24/7 monitoring. It could include your endpoints, your network. It could also include your cloud too. So from a M365 side, there might be an agent that is installed there that's watching all of your mail flows, or your out of offices, or your rules, or things like that, and it will alert the people that are watching this, and then they'll choose, is it a threat? Yeah. Oh, well, you know what? This company's based in the U.S. and we're seeing logins from China or Russia, and just an hour ago they just logged in from Buffalo, New York. So obviously that's not possible physically. You can't travel from the U.S. to either one of those places in an hour. So that's the kind of thing that would raise suspicions, and they would basically react upon that. And it's whatever the rules of engagement are for the MDR company, whether it's locking them down or alerting somebody or something of that nature. But that's kind of what it is. Again, it does imply that there's some kind of device there. It's usually an NDR device that they put inside. NDR, that network device inside there. And again, that's feeding, they're just basically watching the logs from that in a central location, and there's actually a human reacting to do they need to alert, do they not need to alert? The other thing too is, once a threat has been identified, obviously that SOC, it's basically called a Security Operations Center, will respond to that threat accordingly, as I mentioned. And again, they do have the capability of isolating. So that's the biggest thing. If they detect a piece of ransomware that shows up on one of your servers, they can, if you're utilizing a managed detection and response here, they have the capability of basically shutting network access down. They can still get to it, through their piece of software, but it will not communicate back with any other machine on your network. It won't communicate out to the internet either. So until that machine gets remediated, and that threat gets remediated, then they can, bring that back out of isolation, and you can either, pull it from the network and then rebuild it if need be, or if you think it's safely been quarantined and remediated, you can then put it back into service. But that's MDR. And then last but not least, we have XDR. So XDR is basically extended detection and response. So this one basically is a combination of every one previous to this. So this basically has all those other entities, the EPDR, the NDR, the MDR, and it basically not that monitors not only your endpoints but also your entire network. So this is one that will meet all of the NIST standards for your entire network. So basically, this includes everything from the previous slides. This is kind of the latest and greatest of what's out there. It does leverage AI sometimes. It does have automated responses as well too. It takes all those log sources, as I mentioned, from a potential SIEM-like type of environment. It will centralize all that and the configurations, so you have a single pane of glass for all of that information. It does work across multiple vendor products, so you don't need the same products. Every single vendor has to be the same. This will aggregate all of those different vendors into a single pane of glass for you. And then it also, with the threat intelligence, it utilizes that for reducing missed alerts. So the threat intelligence, as I mentioned, a lot of that is being fed from external sources inbound. That's very big companies that's all they do all day long is try to figure out what the threat landscape is out and about and currently going on. And that basically feeds in to this threat intelligence piece of it and saying, hey, we're seeing this active this active exploit that's going on for VMware. Do you have any VMware servers inside here? Well, XDR would know that and say, okay, well, what version are you running? Because this is what versions we're seeing it on. And it's possible for them to block that temporarily until a fix happens, or they can be more alert to be looking for the type of traffic that they're already seeing with that threat intelligence. So it's real-time analyzing things and real-time reaction. So that's what XDR is. So with that, just kind of wrapping up, again, EDR, EPDR is the endpoint side, focused on organizations' endpoints. The NDR is the network detection and response that is focused on the organization's networks. TDR is the threat detection, organizations basically on specific threats. And then XDR is correlating all the combining telemetry into a single platform. And managed detection and response is basically responding to those detections with a person basically watching them. So that's pretty much what we got. Hopefully that clears up at least some of the EDR and what the DRs of all those things are out there. Again, it's one of these things that kind of change as time goes on. So I don't know if there's any questions, but let me see here in the chat. I don't see anything in the chat, so yeah, I don't see anything, Jenna. Do you see anything?
Nothing yet, but yeah, no, another reminder, if anyone does have any questions for Brian, please drop them in the chat right now. I also just dropped a link to register for the next event, which I'll do right now. So that's going to be on March 19th, CyberSmart session, Unleashing the Value of Risk Assessments. So feel free to sign up for that and share that with your team. If you think of some questions later, or if you would like to have a conversation with PCA, please email us directly at info@pcatg.com and we'll make sure to get back to you. But Brian, looks like someone just put a question in there right now. It says, would CTNA be a separate idea to these concepts or a component, for example, EDPR?
It would be, well, yeah, it's kind of a component of EPDR, but it is a little different than straight EPDR. That is a newer thing that's been coming out, and it's definitely a component. That's what I would say. It's kind of at the network side though. So it does have an EPDR component to it. It's kind of a loaded question actually, because it has both. It's looking at I'm assuming you're talking about who's doing this? Cylance, I think. I think it's Cylance that's doing this. It's basically done, it's zero trust at the network layer, but it has two components. It looks at the network piece, it looks at the device piece, and it kind of analyzes both of them. So I would say this is probably more in line with almost TDR, really, because the TDR kind of combines both the EPDR and the network side of things too, much similar to this. So that was how I would answer that without going too far down the rabbit hole with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thanks, Brian. All right, it looks like Sophos also has it. Thank you for the answer.
Okay, yeah,
Awesome.
I knew Cylance did. I didn't know Sophos. That's cool too.
Awesome. Thank you,
And
Matt.
good seeing you, Matt, by the way.
Awesome. All right. Looks like there's no other questions at this time. So again, keep a lookout for the webinar recording and resources, and we'll be in touch for next month. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye.